All right, so today's session, autism, past life memory, what the academic pioneers are learning. This is a brand new field of investigation. There hasn't really been very much published work on this at the moment, but the gentleman that's going to be speaking with us today is actually heading up that new initiative around autism and past life memory. So it's not even as if this information is hot off the press, because it hasn't even been on the press yet. So we're hearing it as a almost preemptive of what's coming. So really cutting edge stuff. The run of the day is welcome address, which is now. I'm going to give a little bit of background and some other relevant information before introduce as kind of more as an introduction to the speaker. Then the main presentation with questions and answers with Jim Matlock. And then usually we just have a little bit of time sort of milling around and packing up and getting organised and so forth. But then ultimately, for those who wish, there's a nice lunch afterwards that we can all come and have a hangout. So now, can I just get a quick show of hands? Who has heard of, who has listened to the podcast Telepathy Tapes already? All right, so not really a big proportion of the room. Okay, so the Telepathy Tapes podcast is it's kind of relevant to today's discussion, particularly because it demonstrates a very large amount of evidence. You could say not really always highly rigorous scientific evidence, but a very large body of evidence around the capabilities of non-verbal autistic people, mostly children, I think, for the most part, in that they appear to have a capability of being able to read people's minds with 100% accuracy in many cases. And there's some really astonishing results which are reported and described in a lot of detail in the telepathy tapes. And you can see there that the two people that are involved, Diane Hennessy, she's a medical practitioner, and this lady here, what's her name, Kai Dickens, she's a documentarian. So this has actually created big waves around the world, but of course it also comes under a lot of attack from the scientific community, because they find any way they can to dismiss it, because it flies in the face of the current predominant paradigm around materialism, right? So therefore, I actually had a conversation with this lady about a year ago, Marina Weiler. She works at the Division of Perceptual Studies at the University of Virginia, which is probably arguably the foremost body in the world when it comes to parapsychological research, in terms of the seriousness and the rigour that they apply to their investigations. And it just happened that she's heading up a new initiative to investigate this phenomenon around telepathy in autistic children, but with the level of scientific rigour that you would need in order to withstand attacks from the scientific orthodoxy. This is this little image down the bottom here. That's the team from a while ago, which is only about 8 people. The team's more than doubled now. So the Division of Perceptual Studies has really become quite significant. I was very lucky. So just a week ago, I sent an email to Marina and said, "Can you give me an update on how your research is going?" And she sent me this really good email and with a report attached. In the report, she's indicated that the Telepathy Tapes podcast, this is actually a formal academic report that she's produced, but it's just a very preliminary one, and basically making the argument that the Telepathy Tapes represent a cultural and scientific turning point that challenges the entrenched assumptions within science about autism, and also calls for more open and rigorous scientific investigation, which is what they have undertaken. And I'm just going to give you a little bit of detail. Here's the email she sent me. In that email, she talks about the pilot experiments that they're doing. And one of the ways they go about it is the therapist who's working with the autistic child goes into a separate room and reads a randomly generated AI paragraph, and reads that silently to herself, and then goes back to the participant and asks 4 or 5 standardised questions. And they've already got these promising and exciting results, which to start with, so one striking example was the paragraph that was read was about Hedy Lamarr, Right now, I'd never heard of Hedy Lamarr before, but she was no, well, I'm a bit younger, right? So she was from the golden age of Hollywood, but she was also this amazingly brilliant woman who was a self-taught engineer and an inventor, and she actually invented some radio technology that helped the war effort in World War II, right? So what's that? Some radar stuff, something about anti-detection for missiles or something like that. She invented it, right? So she's this incredible woman. So the paragraph was about that. When the therapist went back and asked the autistic kid what was the lesson about, the student immediately spelled, "It's about Hedy Lamarr and her life. She made a machine that usurps harmful frequencies." Now, what was interesting about that in particular was that it was a little bit sophisticated because it had an interpretive layer to it where the word usurps was used, because that wasn't in the original paragraph at all. So it was there was a comprehension there, not simply a parroting back of what was in the paragraph. Also, when asked what else he learned, it was, that Lamarr was an engineer, was never formally trained, and was born during World Wars, all accurate. What was then really interesting was when the therapist asked, how did he receive the information? He said, "I got it from the back of your head." Right. And that was particularly interesting as well, because in the same week, another child who had not met those two children hadn't met, they said something very similar, which was, "I got it from the blind spot at the back of your head." Right. So what these children are perceiving, it's really intriguing. So there's been many other examples of accurate responses like that. All right. So now getting on to Jim Matlock himself, right? So he's actually written a couple of major books, but this one was produced in 2019. It was won an award from the Parapsychological Association, and it's a fantastic book. It's very sort of very thorough, and it's not a populist kind of book. It is an academic book where I'm sure Jim has spent countless hours getting into everything in a lot of detail. So introduction, and then the belief in reincarnation. He goes into a lot of, because he's an anthropologist by training, so he gets into a lot of the history and different cultures around the world. And I hadn't realised, for example, that Indigenous Australians have a kind of reincarnation belief amongst some of them, right? Goes into the various principles and signs of reincarnation. Then ultimately, one of my favourite parts is in chapter 3, research methods and interpretive frames. He does a really thorough takedown of the critics. So basically, there's a lot of critics that look at this stuff and they say, well, this is all just poppycock and all that sort of thing, right? So they go in, they're looking for something to fault so that they can dismiss the field of research. And we even have people, there's one guy, Michael Shermer, I think his name was, he said, well, you don't have to read very deeply into the literature to realise that this is simply a case of patternicity, right? Which means the tendency of human beings to find patterns in random noise. Right. It also happens to be a term that he coined, so it's probably his favourite word. He loves to bandy about whenever he can, right? Anyway, the proof that he didn't bother to read deeply into it is if he actually read the literature, he would never have tried to dismiss it with an idea around patternicity, because once you actually read it, there's just no way in the known universe that could be a reasonable explanation. So, but in his book, there's ultimately like a small handful of academics which have actually waded in and tried to, go in detail. And for the most part, their dismissals and their critiques are petty, they're trivial, insignificant. Sometimes they're overgeneralized. They try to smear the whole body of they might find some faults and they might not be completely unfounded, but they're sort of overgeneralized, over-exaggerated, and ultimately they all fall apart. So it's quite interesting how I love the way Jim goes in there and just does a completely thorough takedown. And you can see how the broader scientific community then just relies on these people's very flimsy and weak arguments against this field of research to just say, well, such and such already looked into this, and he found out that there were these faults, so we don't need to worry about that anymore. Right. So that's what's happening in the scientific community generally. So I really like that part of it. The other thing I loved about reading this book is related to my next slide, which is Jim and his team head up a fantastic Facebook group called Signs of Reincarnation, which is named after his book. As you might be able to see there, there's almost 380,000 members around the world. It's a very active site, but it's also extremely well curated, because any questions which get admitted, first of all, questions have to get admitted. So it's not one of those groups where it's just filled with all kinds of crap from everybody. It has to be a decent question that we can get into, and it's always answered by a qualified academic. Other people can come in and comment and place things against it as well, but there's always at least one answer from one of the team of academics. There's about a dozen different academics that can give qualified research-based answers. So it's a really good quality site. And so the fantastic thing about reading the book is, as I was reading the book and if I had questions, then I was actually engaging with the author and his team about whatever it was that came up in the book that I wanted to talk about. So yeah, if you're interested in that level, then that's a great place to go. And there's so many good conversations that come up. And then finally, I'll just point out, Jim also runs a 15-week Signs of Reincarnation online course. It's only $150, but from his website there, jamesgmatlock.com.au. Oh, no, not au, sorry. jamesgmatlock.com. You can find all his material, and if you want to get in depth, then you can get a very thorough understanding around reincarnation research. So that's basically my my lead up to introducing today Dr. Jim Matlock, an anthropologist and world-class reincarnation researcher. He's the creator of a theory around his own specific theory around how reincarnation takes place, which he calls the processual soul theory. He's been involved in parapsychology and reincarnation studies for over 45 years, editorial board member of the Journal of Scientific Exploration and the Journal of Near-Death Studies, research fellow with the Parapsychology Foundation. And apart from those two books that I've just mentioned, he's published many more articles and so forth. And as I've mentioned, the curator of that top-notch Facebook group, Signs of Reincarnation. Please join me in giving Jim a very warm welcome.
All righty. And I see the audience. Hello, everyone. I guess, thank you, Russ. It was a wonderful introduction. So I'll be talking about autism and past life memory. Now, this is obviously a very different sort of autism, or, it's the same sort of autism, but it's a different angle on autism than what Russ was talking about with the telepathy tapes, because that was mainly concerned with the nonverbal autistic people, whereas I'm talking about verbal ones. And I'm talking about past life memory, not any extrasensory perception. So these are different issues, but we are dealing still with neurodivergence. What I'll briefly describe then 5 cases of autistic children with past life memory, and then I'll compare those cases to cases of autistic people with past life memory of adults, that is, adults autistic. These cases are important, I'll argue, because they suggest ways the neurology is involved in past life memory retrieval, because autism, after all, is a neurological, which is order we know. And so anything that is involved with the autism affects the neurology, and in this case, the neurology of memory. And so that's one thing that makes these very interesting cases to look at. First, I want to give you some theoretical context, and this comes from my book, the book that Russ was talking about, Signs of Reincarnation. And I want to explain a little bit. I give you a theoretical framework for understanding this, at least the way I understand what's going on in this. So we start with what survives death and reincarnates as consciousness. People say the soul. One of the things I had to ask myself in writing this book, and the book, by the way, is the textbook for my course. It's the course lectures put together as a book. It's now the textbook for the course. So one of the things I had to ask myself was, what is it that reincarnates? People say the soul, but then what is the soul, right? And so I realized, well, the simplest way of understanding this really is that it's consciousness that reincarnates. Consciousness survives death and then comes into a new body later. Now, another thing that I had to ask myself, if past life memory is a thing, and there certainly is a lot of evidence that it is, how can we explain it? How it, what are we talking about here? Are we talking about the Akashic records? How is it retrieved, right? Well, the conclusion I came to is that it's recorded in the subconscious, right? That consciousness has a supraliminal conscious awareness level to it, and it has a subliminal subconscious level to it. And memory of all sorts, I think, is recorded in the subconscious. And that's why it can be transferred from one body to another along with the rest of consciousness. Now, past life memory may be implicit as well as explicit. Now, these are terms that come from mainstream psychology and memory studies, and I may need to explain them a little bit. I'll start with the explicit part. Explicit memories are what we normally call just memory, what we think of as memory. That is, memories that we talk about, declarative memories, autobiographical memories. These are the imaged memories that we have, okay? If we can talk about it, if we can be conscious of it, that's explicit. Implicit memories are the sorts of memories that we're not conscious of, right? And that can include things like behaviors, right? I mean, if you think about it, we don't remember our behaviors, but we clearly do remember at some level, at an unconscious level. That's implicit. Emotional memories are often implicit too. So there's the implicit dimension to memory, and there's the explicit dimension to memory. And it's important to appreciate. Now, after reincarnation, memories of a past life experiences continue to affect us. Okay, all this stuff is in the subconscious. We're not aware of it unless it comes up to our conscious awareness, becomes explicit. But the implicit stuff can still affect us. All right. And so and they're still there. All of our memories of the past are still there in our subconscious. We're just not aware of them, most of us. Now, implicit memories may affect us in the absence of explicit memories. This is also something that's very important to grasp, right? So behavioral memories, our behaviors, our emotions, our personality, right, can be influenced from stuff in our subconscious, from stuff in our unconscious that's carried over from past lives without our being aware of it. All right, we got it figured out finally. So do I have time to take it from the beginning again? I'll just go very quickly over this.
Okay, just real quick.
Okay, so here we are at the beginning, and I just said, briefly describe 5 cases of autistic children with past life memory. Then I'll compare these cases to autistic adults. And as I said, these cases are important because it's just way neurology is involved in past life memory retrieval. Now, I won't repeat everything I said, but and this is more or less where I was on this page. First, some theoretical context, and this comes from my book, Signs of Reincarnation, that Russ was talking about. And I don't think I need to repeat all this, but what survives death and reincarnates as consciousness, past life memory is recorded in the subconscious mind. Past life memory may be implicit as well as explicit, and after reincarnation, memories of past life experiences continue to affect us. Implicit memories may affect us in the absence of explicit memories. Now, this is where I was, right, when you caught me? Okay, so now we will go on. Okay, Good. I'm glad you caught me at that time, because I'm now ready to go into the first case that I'll be talking about, the first child case. And this is Aya Ivanov's. This is a pseudonym that was given to her first by a story in the Washington Post. And I'll explain why this got into the Washington Post. But it's a case of a young girl who talked a lot about invisible companion she called Nina. She described Nina as having a different appearance from herself. A is blonde, and Nina she described as having brown hair, darker hair. At times that her behavior, that is Aya's behavior, would shift when she's talking about Nina. Remember, she's saying, she's acting like Nina is external to herself, as an invisible companion. But sometimes she sort of shifted, in her behavior when she was talking about Nina, as if she were becoming Nina, as if Nina was possessing her, as if there was some multiple personality going on or something. It was very odd. Now, Aya was also afraid, and this is not, now Nina sometimes did some of these things too, and Nina would behave in certain ways, but Aya herself was afraid of loud, sharp sounds and loud noises. And one of the things she did is react to the sound of food processor by explaining, how did a tank get in here? Get that tank out of here, right? Now, by this point, her mother was writing emails to a psychotherapist, Sean Rubin. He's going to be important in this, who was her advisor when she was going through a master's program. And he had asked her to help out with his billing practice. He had hired her for that. And so they were in contact. And as Aya got into this Nina behaviors thing, she wrote to Sean, that is, Aya's mother did, asking what he thought was going on with all of this strange stuff. And so we have this record, this email record of them that I can go back and look at, right, and see all of this. And so one of the things that she says in this email is that I had said, how did a tank get in here? Get that tank in here. Meanwhile, they're trying to figure out what is going on here, right? And they're thinking, well, could this be a past life memory, right? Is it mediumship? Is it what is it? What's going on? Then she told her mother, Aya told her mother, Nina has numbers on her arm. And that naturally suggested Holocaust, right? That Nina was a Holocaust victim. And so they started looking for Ninas who were caught up in the Holocaust, but they were just, there's so many, they really didn't get anywhere. Then Nina remarked, Nina is the flower of the world. And that was the clue that Sean Rubin needed. He put this together. He thought of Nina Graboy, who was a Holocaust survivor, actually, who emigrated to the United States in 1940. I have the date later, 44, something like that, and lived the rest of her life in the United States. And she wrote this book, One Foot in the Future, in 1991. It was published in 1991. She died in 1999. So when he made that connection, Sean bought the book for Aya's mother and sent it to her. When Aya saw the book, she said it was her book. How did you get my book? She said, and she carried it to her room, put it on her bed, and then for the next several days, and you can see a picture, she's pretending to read it. And as you can see how young she is, and she's pretending to read it, and she's saying every word that she can read, she's reading aloud. When she saw a picture of Grabois, because once they had that name, they started doing research on her. They found this in 1941 was when she came. When they found this picture that was in the New York, I believe New York Post in 1941. When I saw that, she said, "That's me." Another wonderful thing that she did. Now, so Grabois was in New York for a while. She was out on Long Island, and then she got tired of her life there, moved to Manhattan, got caught up with the psychedelic movement, actually, with Timothy Leary. She was a good friend of Timothy Leary's, and stayed in New York at the beginning of that. And then later, after LSD became demonized in the early 60s or so, she moved out to the Bay Area in California, and there got involved with humanistic psychology, right? So she was acquainted with all these people who in the Journal of Humanistic Psychology. Now, the Journal of Humanistic Psychology began to be published in 1961, and it kept this cover throughout Grabois' life. That is the cover you see on the left. After Grabois' death, they changed the cover dramatically, right? Modernized it. Her mother had copies of both the old and the new because she was also in humanistic psychology, right? When Aya saw a journal with the new cover, she tore the cover off of it, saying this wasn't right. Again, a recognition. Okay, so the next thing that happened is that they now think that they figured out, yes, this is a reincarnation case. They think they figured out who it was, and they think this is really important. They need to involve investigators. And Sean talked earlier about the Division of Personality Studies at UVA. This is the group that Ian Stevenson founded, and then Jim Tucker took over from him. Jim Tucker is now retired, but at the time, this is just a couple of years ago, at the time, Jim Tucker was still there. So Sean encouraged Aya to contact Jim Tucker at UVA, which she did. And he then arranged for Tucker to meet Aya and her mother at his home in Vienna, Virginia. So the first thing Tucker did when he arrived there, and he took with him the Washington Post reporter who wrote the story that I mentioned earlier, that gave the pseudonym Aya. That's why we use it. All right, the first thing, now he is a child psychiatrist, but and he is experienced. And if you've read any of his books, you know how experienced he is as a researcher of these types of cases. And why he did this, I don't know. But the first thing, I think I do know actually, the first thing, and I'll explain, but the first thing he asked her, the first thing he said to her was, "So Nina has numbers on her arm." Because that's what Aya had said. And it was the numbers on her arm that suggested a Holocaust life. And so Tucker is thinking that would help identify the Nina. And if Nina Grabois had numbers on her arm, then that would be an identification, right? And so that would make everything fit. It was the wrong thing to do. So Aya ran and hid under a table, and they had really little interaction after that. Now, the thing is, and this is what bothered Tucker, Nina Grboy had not had numbers on her because she hadn't been at Auschwitz or Birkenau. Those were the camps where they tattooed numbers on the arm. The others didn't. She was in a camp in North Africa. That's one reason why she was able to get out and come to the States in 1941, right? But if she had had numbers on her arm, that would have suggested that the identification of Grboy was correct, right? The fact that she didn't meant to Tucker that it probably was not correct, right? And therefore, the identification was wrong. It was an unsolved case, and he lost a lot of his interest in it, okay? And it was at this point Sean got in touch with me because Sean believed, well, he thought Tucker was wrong. He was convinced that there was something here, so he got in touch with me about it. And I come at these cases differently, I guess. This picture on the left is Grboy again, toward the end of her life, when she was out in the Bay Area. And this is actually in her house. This is what her house looked like. She had very little money then, and so this is just stuff that she went and got. She had continued, she got really big in LSD and other hallucinogens. She's tripping all the time. And so this is the environment that she made for herself. But anyway, so that's Grboy. Now, and there are things in this case, and when they first told me about this, Sean and Aya's mother, when they first told me about this case, I was really intrigued about it because there are a lot of things that really sound like Stevenson's reincarnation cases. They're the apparent behavioral carryovers. They're the fears and phobias of the sounds. They're the recognition memories. And think about those of the book, of the picture, of tearing that cover off the journal. I mean, just incredible recognition memories. But these are all implicit memories. And this is why I brought that up first, because Aya had no explicit memories of Grboy's life. She never talked about Grboy. She would talk about Nina, this or that. But she would not talk about Grboy's life as anything she, Aya, had lived or remembered. Okay. Now, this is really unusual, really highly unusual. And at the time, I didn't know of another case like it. The typical reincarnation case has both explicit and implicit memories. You've got both. And that's one of the things that makes them so interesting, is that you've got both of them. There are other silent cases, and the silent cases, that's what we call cases where there are no explicit, no declarative past life memories, no autobiographical memories, with behavioral memories only. But in most of them, the behavioral memories are relatively weak. Here, you had very strong behavioral memories, you had very strong recognition memories, you had very strong emotional memories, you had Nina, all this Nina stuff, but no explicit memories at all. Okay, another puzzlement was Aya's talk about Nina, who she seemed to imagine was external to herself, like a lot of imaginary friends. So as I began to read about imaginary friends, I learned that this is common. Many children with imaginary friends imagine them as being external to themselves, separate from themselves, right? And many of them are truly imaginary. Now, there are invisible companions who aren't imaginary, but that's a separate issue. There are truly imaginary friends that are clearly fantastical. Okay, so the imaginary friends may be experienced as independent entities, and that just like Nina was for Aya. So Nina really did seem to fit as an imaginary friend, okay? But, so here's the thing. Aya appeared to have subliminal memories of Grboy, which she had displaced, to use a psychological term, she had displaced onto Nina. Right? But why? Okay, so now I didn't know at the beginning that Aya was on the autism spectrum. I didn't know this. If I'd known it earlier, I would have factored that in and began thinking earlier about this. Could autism explain some of this? Right? But after I was told that, I started looking into it. And here's what I found. Okay, so it turns out that autism can suppress episodic memory formation while leaving other kinds of memory untouched. And there are review articles about this. There have been a lot of studies. This is something that's very well known. It's not controversial. Many autistic people do not have good autobiographical memories of their present lives. This is exactly what we see with Aya, except in relation to her past life memories. Okay, no explicit past life memories, but the other kinds of memories are there. The recognition memories are there. The behavioral memories are there. The emotional memories are there. All the other kinds of memories that we see in all the typical reincarnation cases are there. But she had no if she had no episodic memories of Graboy, that would explain why she never talked about Graboy's life. Okay, so case 2. In research, this happens sometimes. Things come to you when you need them. As I was puzzling about this, because this is the first case, remember this is the first case I had encountered like this, right? I mean, this is why, I don't blame Tucker for not seeing this stuff, because nobody had seen it. I mean, this was something that was like totally new, and it took me a while to put all the pieces together. But as I was beginning to, this other case came to my attention through my Facebook group that Russ talked about. Charles Lawson was thought to be the return of his father's brother. Okay, some cases are family cases like this, that we call them family cases if they return the reincarnations in the family line, right? This one, like many suicide cases, has a return in the family line. Okay, so now Charles, and this again, Charles Lawson's a pseudonym, but anyway, Charles was born about 19 months after his uncle's suicide. Now, his uncle had hung himself, and look at this picture. You see, he had these birthmarks here, and down here. These actually are what are called hemangiomas. These were red, splotchy birthmarks. They were so splotchy, his mother actually had to have the top one surgically reduced in size, but you can still see it here. This is right where our noose would have rested, right? And this one, you can imagine if he's putting the noose on, maybe he brushed his neck right down here. These are the kind of birthmarks that you see in reincarnation cases. Stevenson investigated hundreds of cases like this with birthmarks, and other people have too. Charles was also born a torticollis. Now, torticollis is tilted neck. He had torticollis in the womb. He was born with torticollis, that is a twisted neck. If you've ever seen pictures of somebody who hung themselves, their neck is usually turned like that. He had to undergo 2 years of physical therapy to get rid of his torticollis. Okay, so here we have these physical, really strong physical things that tie him to his uncle. Okay, now I didn't talk earlier about how my model explains these, so I waited to this point to do it. I explained these as being psychogenic, and what I mean by that is the mind, the psyche produces them. The incoming consciousness, the incoming mind, uses its psychokinesis, its PK, right, to impress its new body with these things, right? And anything of significance, of emotional significance to the previous person can show up as birthmarks or birth defects. It doesn't have to be mortal wounds, it can be, but earring holes, all sorts of things, surgical scars, tattoos can show up as birthmarks. So it's clearly something psychogenic. It's not something automatic in any way. So anyway, so that's how I explain it. The important thing here is the physical signs. He also had behavioral signs, personality and behavioral traits. Like his uncle, Charles was musically talented. Like his uncle, he enjoyed playing with Lego. Both were interested in the military. Charles, in fact, wanted to join the military, tried to. He was caught with alcohol in his dorm room, and he was kicked out. He was no longer allowed to join the military. Yet he was still allowed to get a work on a military base, and so he was working there at the time that he killed himself. What happened was he and he was only 17 at the time. Charles, the uncle was rather, when he killed himself. What happened is that he accidentally, and he was just 17, he was just beginning to drive, but accidentally had hit, he had not seriously injured and not killed, but had hit a neighbor's child who had run behind his car as he was bucking out of the driveway. That put him into a depression. He was never able to pull out of it. He killed himself. But anyway, so both liked to play rough when they were young. Both struggled with emotional problems. Both probably were on the autism spectrum. His father probably was. His uncle, rather, probably was. His father probably may be too. But none of them, and he also has not been tested, but there are indications that they were. Okay, now, like Aya, he did not have any memories of his uncle's life, despite this, despite the birthmarks. Okay? Despite all the personality and the behavioral stuff, he had no memories. He did, though, have an imaginary friend who, like Nina, seemed to know things or be related to the uncle in a way that Charles was not consciously aware. Okay? The uncle was so obsessed with Batman, his tombstone was actually emblazoned with "I am Batman." That was on his tombstone, "I am Batman." So him is talking about Batman and Spider-Man, things that Charles, at his age, at 3 and 4, he hadn't been introduced to Batman and Spider-Man. He had never heard of them. But here is him talking about them. Now, one of the interesting things about him emerged. That is, Charles first began to talk about him as an imaginary companion when he started going to daycare. And the daycare was immediately abutting the cemetery where his uncle was buried. Charles didn't know that. Okay. And Charles didn't know that, of any of these links to his uncle. He still does not. Him also wanted, and him at first would show up only at the daycare, and later he showed up at home. But him wanted Charles to play with all these toys, things like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It was like for older kids. Charles didn't know anything about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles until him starts talking about them. But his uncle was big on the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Him wanted Charles to play tetherball. Charles didn't know anything about tetherball. There wasn't a tetherball at his daycare. There was a tetherball at his uncle's home, and his uncle enjoyed playing tetherball. So all of these ways, him seems to represent the uncle. Charles is totally unaware of it. Again, so like Aya, we've got an apparently autistic child, and Aya's diagnosed. No, she's not, but she's not diagnosed, but we did do a test, and she seems likely she scored probable on it. Charles is not. We never were able to give him that test. We don't really know. But we both of them, they're very similar here. Now, so going on to the next one, the third case here. Now, this is an Indian boy called Lavit Pradhan. The main feature of this case is an English language xenoglossy in a Hindi-speaking family. Now, and again, we're dealing with no explicit past life memories, but other very strong indications of a past life, right? This is a xenoglossy case. That's what we call this, when children speak languages that never had any opportunity to learn. Now, his family was a Hindi medium family. And what that means is that they were Hindi nationalists who were educated in Hindi language, not English, right? Their communities were Hindi-based. These are people who want to distance themselves from British influence, from outside influence, want to stay, go back to Indian culture, right? And so they distance themselves from all of these influences, or they try to, right? And so they're a totally Hindi-speaking family. And here he is born into that family speaking English. He starts speaking late, like many autistic kids do. But when he starts at 27 months, he speaks English. And he spoke English exclusively for 2 years. Now his parents are speaking Hindi. Hindi is the language of the home. He's not picking that up. He's just continuing on with his English. I mean, it's just like amazing. So they started him in daycare, and I have to give it to his parents. Even though they're Hindi medium and felt that way about it, they recognize that he was different, and they put him in English medium schools, English medium daycare, right? So at his daycare, he was taught to form English letters, right? He came home, and you see this picture here, my car. He did this when he was 4, okay? He came home from his daycare, and he writes this picture. I have a hard time seeing it as a car, but he wrote my car. I mean, in his family, they don't really know any English. Now but his father began to learn a little bit, and so he can communicate with them. And you ask, how did they communicate? Through gestures. And the family knew a little bit of English. How can you be in India and not know a little bit? And so they sort of figured out what he was saying. But he would use words that they did not know. His vocabulary, even before he went to daycare, his vocabulary was far outstripped theirs. So it wasn't just the exclusive English, it was this, his vocabulary was well beyond anything that they could understand. So they took videos of him. And that is why we know what we know about this. With Aya, we have the emails, the written emails to go back to. With Lavit, we have all these cell phone videos to listen to, so we can actually hear his English We can hear him as he changes, and so at 6, he's now 6. He's effectively bilingual. He's picked up Hindi. He still speaks English preferentially, though. His English is shifted, and that's another thing about his English. Early on, it was sort of an American accent in English, not an Indian accent in English. Right? But now, over the years, as he's been exposed to more Hindi or English, Indian, I should say, English, Hindi English accent, he's picked that up. And so his accent in speaking English is shifted. You can hear that in the videos. Okay, now it's not just the xenoglossy. There are also these behaviors, these unusual behaviors. And here, this is not a solved case. We don't know who he was. We can't say that this matches, right, the previous person. We just know that he is doing these odd things for his family. He's obsessed with construction vehicles, and to the point that his family bought all these toys for him. He enjoyed building things with blocks, again, suggesting construction. And I found this very striking. He dislikes Indian food. He asks for pancakes with syrup, of all things. He also disliked Indian weather. And he was, like many autistic people, he was temperature sensitive sometimes, and also sound sensitive. So it's not clear that he's on the spectrum. We did a screening test for him, and it came back negative, but that could be a false negative because there are these under indications that he is on the spectrum somewhere. Anyway, so here again, we see the behavioral memories along with the xenoglossy, but no declarative PLM, right? Apparently no episodic memories. Apparently, though, and no displacement, no imaginary friend here, right? So it would seem that, it's just the subliminal, the past life memories are just all subliminal. Okay, so case 4. And this one I'm just going to go over briefly here. I don't have time to say too much more. I wrote about, this is my first one, and I wrote about it in my first book, I Saw a Light and Came Here. That I wrote with Erlinda Harrelson, who's another reincarnation researcher that you may, he's a better known one, earlier one, you may have read some of his things. This is the first autism and past life memory case I studied. And I didn't see the commonalities with it at first. I mean, until I'd studied these other cases, I didn't see, it was just, I thought it was just autism, right? Now, Craig's autism is diagnosed, right? And we know that it is hereditary. Again, he had no explicit past life memories, nor did he have an imaginary playmate. He did, though, have behavioral and personality traits. And at one point, he seems to have had a recognition memory of something that his mother said. He seemed to key into that. As I say, I'm not going to take time to get into the details of this. But anyway, the things that, the way he behaved, his personality traits, and particularly that reaction, suggested to his mother that he was her father returned. Okay, and they were estranged at the time. She was estranged from her father. She did not know that her father had died 10 years before Craig was conceived. She didn't know. All right. And she knows the precise date of the conception because she was in a same-sex relationship at the time, and both of them decided they wanted to have children, and so they arranged to be impregnated. So they know the days, right? They know the days, and so we know Craig's conception was 10 days after her father's death, right? But she didn't know it at the time. She did not know this until later. Anyway, if you're interested more in this case, you can find it in my book. I mean, because I'm plugging my book there. Anyway, to go on to the next case, Christopher Forrest. I said at the beginning, I'm going to talk about 5 kids' cases. This is the 5th one. And this one is different. Because Christopher, again, is diagnosed, and he does have past life memories. Right? In fact, he's talked about 3 different past lives. One of them appears to be set in the 1980s. And the picture on the left, it is him here, shows the expression typically he adopts when he's talking about this life. His mother tells me that when she can tell the different lives, not only from what he's saying about them, but the way he behaves. He sort of shifts his behavior when he gets into them. In each of those lives, there are these subtle changes. Some of them are subtle, sometimes not so subtle. This one is not so subtle. Anyway, so to give you some idea of the 1980s life, he was late to start talking, like many autistic kids are, but then almost immediately he started saying, "I died." Okay. Now, the first time he said this, and I believe I have this right, I'm still studying this case, and I may have some of the details wrong, but the first time he said that I died was in response to seeing his father playing a video game in which a character died and was shown in a pool of blood. You know, why you let a young child see that, I don't know. But anyway, this child saw it. And like many past life memories, they can be evoked by seeing and hearing things, just like present life memories are. Many times they're cued like this. So that cued for Christopher his memory, right? And what he began talking about then, and it was another year or so before he started giving any details, but what he started talking about more and more is memories of having shot up a medical facility. And he made this drawing when he was 4, and see MD appear in the corner. Now, he was not, at 4, he had not learned to write. The same way Lovett hadn't learned to write when he wrote. Well, he had been taught how to write letters. So you can say yes, he'd learned to write a little bit. He hadn't been taught how to form words, but he had been taught how to form letters. Christopher didn't even have that, and yet he writes MD up here. And this supposedly is this represents what he did. So clearly, I mean, he seems to have these memories, right? And he is talking about them in the way the others weren't. And again, he has some behaviors to go along with his memories. He would sometimes act out the shooting. He's obsessed with 1980s music. That's why we sort of pin this to the 1980s. He's given us enough clues with this, and there's some other things I haven't mentioned, that we think we can probably figure out who it was. In fact, we think we may know, but we need to do more research on this to be confident. But anyway, at this point, it's still an unsolved case. But the significance of this one is that here's an autistic kid with past life memories, right? Now, so after he had been talking about shooting up the medical facility, and that was for about 2 years, he started talking about another life that appears to be a life of a pilot, probably a military pilot, whose plane was downed during World War II, but the pilot was captured and tortured. This is what he described. So we can't be sure it's World War II, but that from the imagery, that sort of seems what it is. Then the third life came out most recently. And in this one, he said he saw his father shot and killed with arrows. And this is the life that led us to choose Forrest as his surname, Christopher Forrest. Again, this is a pseudonym. Because he would also talk about forests a lot, right? And in fact, he even refers to his town as a forest. Really strange, odd thing, right? And other towns as other forests he wants to go to. Again, sorry, I didn't proof this one very well, did I? Okay. So this one, keep this in mind for the next. So some adult cases now. Now, it's unusual for children to recall more than one past life, like Christopher did. Stevenson has a couple of cases with children having more than one life, but usually, usually it's just two. There's only one other one where the child recalled 3 human lives and also claimed to be an animal. But with adults, it's more common. And I have a picture up here. You may know Jenny Cockle's book, some of you, Yesterday's Children. She later, not at this time, but later, she recognized that she's autistic. She's not diagnosed autistic, was diagnosed in adulthood, and written another book about that. She has another life memory, which is solved, and she has a third life come very close to being solved. So she would be the only person, if we accept that third one is solved, and she thinks she may have the identification, we just don't have a name for it. If we count that as solved, she is the only person, child or adult, who has 3 past lives that are solved. And she's autistic. Okay? And she remembers this life that's described in this book from childhood. And the lives of one of her other lives, the memories of one of her other lives also from childhood. And this is something else that's beginning to emerge about adults with autism who have past life memories. They often had childhood memories too, but they've retained them in a way that many children with past life memories don't. So this is what I'm looking at now. And so Russ started off saying this is all new stuff, and it is. And we're still very much in the process of studying this. I have heard, as of several other diagnosed adults with past life memories at this point, because I've gone looking for them and asking about them. I haven't yet studied these cases in depth because I'm preparing to do so with the approval of an IRB, that's an institutional review board. This is something that many scientific journals want you to have. I'm not at an institution, so it's harder for me to get. If I were at UVA, I would, just use theirs. I found one that I can use now. I'll partner with somebody at a university. We'll do it that way. I have a team now, a fairly substantial team that has autism specialists, has neurologists and psycho neurology people, and so we'll cover all bases with this. People from clinical psychology who are used to working with autistic adults and children. So we'll have a sizable team, but we'll cover all sorts of bases that we need as we look into this. And we'll probably be doing, in addition to studying individual cases, we'll also be doing a survey. And the idea is there, as we begin to understand more about the patterns from individual case studies, to put those in a survey and then when we use the survey to better understand things, form hypotheses that we can then take into the laboratory. Because the laboratory thing is where we want to end up. Now, this is also important. Taken together with the cases of Aya, Charles, Levitt, and Craig, Christopher and other adult autistic experiencers suggest that autism can enhance PLM as well as suppressing it. Right? And it turns out this is true of autism more broadly. Right? Autistic individuals, some of them do not have good episodic memories, but others have excellent episodic memories, excellent autobiographical memories. So again, exactly the same thing we see with autism affecting present life memory. We see affecting past life memory. For some of them, the episodic memory is suppressed, and for others, they have superior autobiographical memories. Exactly what we see. And that is what is so exciting here, because this suggests that there are neurobiological factors that really we have not had a way before to get at. We've not really been able to do more than just imagine that this was something that was going on that could perhaps explain past life memory, right? That there was a neurological factor here. But this gives us a way of studying that in the lab, right? And we just need to before we do that, we don't want to, it would be better, not to just to go in and do it simply in an exploratory way. It'd be better to go in with some hypotheses that we can test, and if we can do that, if we can have hypotheses that we can test based on this earlier research, not based on just theory, but based on research, and then we can find that supported in the lab, this is going to be something that the skeptics are going to have a very hard time dealing with. Okay, so I haven't looked at my watch as I'm going along. I think I probably have time here for questions, so I'll turn over now to the questions. I'll stop sharing this, and if I can stop sharing, let me see if I can get back to it. I can see everybody.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jim. Thank you.
All right. Well, you're welcome. Yes, I'm interested in the questions and feedback. I'm sure that there are many questions.
All right. So you're not going to be able to hear questions from the audience. So I'll hear them and then I'll speak it into the microphone from here. Okay.
Okay.
So
very
who
good.
has a question? All right. Yes, lady up the back. Do you know what MD stood for with case 5?
Medical doctor, isn't it? I'm not sure what MD stands for. I mean,
Okay.
it's the main, that we presume that it's the main thing of, it means a medical doctor. Because he seemed to remember shooting up a medical facility, so he presumed that he put MD on there to associate it with the clinic that he shot up.
Yep. All right. Any other questions? Yes.
I'm a little confused with the implicit memory or consciousness that's carried over from the deceased body to a new body. Is it that's being transferred, and how's it transferred?
So in relation to explicit memories and what, subconscious memories?
Subconscious is implicit.
Right. What's being carried over?
Well, okay, my suggestion is that...
Sorry, Jim, I'm just trying to clarify the question here. So how do memories get transferred from one to the next? Oh,
yeah,
so
okay,
yes.
I understand the question.
Yep.
I heard it well enough, and then you amplified it for me. All right, I've got to go back to my theory here. The way I understand it, consciousness is not generated by the brain, right? Consciousness is something that interfaces with the brain, right? So when our bodies die, our consciousness is simply freed of our bodies, okay? Our consciousness continues to exist in this discarnate state until the consciousness then possesses a new body. And that's how I think of reincarnation, as a possession of a body, of a new body, right? So this consciousness, which is surviving death and carrying on in the intermission state, this is our term, intermission for the in-between state, and then possessing the new body, has a conscious level to it, a superliminal conscious level, and a subconscious subliminal level to it. And what I'm suggesting is that memories, both explicit memories, those are the conscious memories that we have, and the implicit memories, that is the behaviors, and it's habitual behaviors, right? Habitual behaviors is what we're talking about, right? The habitual behaviors and other things that require, by the way, neural pathways, right? This is how habitual behaviors become habitual. We do things over and over again, and our brains get attuned to them, and we build up these neural pathways. This is why artists and athletes practice all the time, to keep those pathways strong so that they excel at their activities. It's the same thing, though, for other sorts of behaviors. So all of that sort of stuff, all of the memories that would have to be transferred to the new body, okay, I think, have to be held in the subconscious, the subliminal part of consciousness, right? So when the consciousness then possesses the new body, they're there. They're there in the subconscious. And I haven't talked about how they get drawn up. I have some ideas of that. I mentioned one thing, and that is cueing. Triggers for them can help bring them up, right? There may be other reasons for them coming up. Certain lives may be especially memorable, for instance, and the memories may be closer to the surface of awareness for that reason and have an easier time bubbling up. But anyway, they're there. They're there in the subconscious, right? And this is for neurotypical people as well as neurodivergent people, right? It's just that there seems to be something else going on here, something else involved here in past life memory retrieval. Okay, so it's not just the emotional valence of the memory, right? There seems to be something neurological. Okay, and this could explain why there seem to be genetic links, why certain populations have more of these memories than others, why we often see them run in families, right? At any rate, if there is a neurological thing here that makes past life memories easier, we know in autism, all sorts of neurological things get tweaked, get pushed off. That's why it's called neurodivergent rather than neurotypical, right? It's divergent. It's not typical anymore. It's different. So those differences seem to be sufficient in the case of past life memory, either to suppress the memories or to enhance them. Does this help if I answered your question at all?
Are you okay with that, Di?
Yes, so you're saying it's a genetic transference then?
Is it a genetic transference then?
We don't know yet. this is one of the questions we have. Oh, a genetic transference thing in terms of like genetic memory? No, it cannot be. I think genetics may get involved in the way genetics may affect memory, but as far as the genetic memory goes, no. And the reason I say no is, think about Aya, for instance. There's no connection between her birth family and Nina Graboy, none. They didn't know each other. There's no connection. None. Absolutely none. And so if there's no connection like that, now maybe if we knew more and we can go back 5, 10 generations, maybe we can find something, but certainly not anything that can explain any sort of transference of memories genetically.
All right. Thanks.
And in Charles's case, think about this one too. How are there going to be the physical memories of the way he died? And he died at 17. He didn't have any kids to pass anything on. How could it be genetic in his case? It makes no sense. The genetic, and when you start really thinking about it, when you start thinking about what would have to be for the past life memories that the children in these cases or adults in these cases talk about, what would have to be involved? You cannot find a single case that meets those criteria.
Okay, thanks, Tim. We've got a lot more. We've got a lot more questions.
Okay.
Okay. Yes. Speak up right into here.
You've just made me think about the Dalai Lama and how they find the Dalai Lama, from a mixture of, some sort of, signs, and then they show him objects that he played with as a child. Yeah. So I'm just wondering about, why are you linking it back to autism? Is the autism associated with the profound memories either through trauma or through some higher level of consciousness that the person brings into this life because they're a higher level of consciousness, or a trauma that has interfered with the person and then it comes into the person's brain and affects them? Or is it kind of the other way around? I'm just, maybe that question is not clear. I'm not sure
quite. Okay, there are types of tests that are given to the children to test recognition of the Dalai Lama are sometimes given, to these children too. In in a lot of societies, their children come in and the previous families will test them. They'll test them by showing things. And they'll test them by answering questions. They'll give them these tests, to try to answer to their satisfaction, yes, that these children are indeed the reincarnations they claim to be. So with what we're talking about in the autism cases is nothing really that special in terms of the types of signs. The behaviors that we see in these cases, the personality carries over, we see in these cases. The physical carries over, we see in these cases. We see with all of Stevenson's cases, right? This is a typical sort of phenomenology for these cases. And we see them both with the neurotypical people and with the neurodivergent people. What we have to understand is why with some neurodivergent people are the memories much less. At least the episodic memories are. They have no declarative memories, except they have very strong memories of these other sorts. Whereas with other autistic individuals, the memories are much stronger than we see on average. Why? What is there about the autism that makes for that difference? But as far as the ingredients goes, as far as the types, as far as the phenomenology goes, the types of memories, it's the same thing.
Okay, thank you. John.
As a psychiatrist, I've used hypnosis to explore past life memories. with some of my patients. My feeling is that the hypnosis just shuts down the busy mind and allows those people to tap into what you would call subliminal memories of a past life. Have you tried hypnosis with some of your clients?
Did you hear that? Okay.
I do not. I don't use hypnosis. And I don't use it for a lot of reasons, and it's not used by reincarnation researchers. Stevenson tried, and it was not helpful. When research has been done, and there has been much less research with the memories that are claimed to come up through hypnosis than in the spontaneous cases. But when research has been done with hypnosis, very often the memories do not check out. They can be shown sometimes to be based on cryptomnesia. That's things that people have read but forgotten. They can be shown sometimes to be twisted in some sort of way, and sometimes a significant sort of way. Like there's one famous case where a guy was able to identify his memories based on paintings he saw. But under hypnosis, the name he recalled for himself and his wife were wrong. Right? Other memories that he had, because he was able to identify who he was with the paintings, checked out. But the name was wrong. This is the sort of thing we see with hypnosis all too often. There seems to be something subconsciously that maybe allows some memories to come through, but tries to block the identity. So reincarnationists do not trust hypnosis.
Okay, Rem. Yes.
Right. It can be very helpful in therapy, but it's just not helpful in research.
Yeah, very interesting, Jim. Look, I did a little bit of reading over the last few weeks on the subject and trying to sort of identify common factors. One thing that came out was that children in the ages 4 to 6 are particularly disposed to past life memories, and the association is strengthened if there is trauma. And I think it was something like 60 to 70% of children with past life association was associated with trauma. The other thing is, and which links to your autism, or possibly could link, is that it was interesting that when there is brain damage as a result of an accident, or in the case of, I think his name is Jim Keep or something, he was born without a corpus callosum. He had this extraordinary memory as a result of this aberrant brain that enabled him to memorize 12,000 books, yet he couldn't button up his shirt. So what I'm trying to say is, it's like we have an extraordinary brain, and it's accentuated under trauma, or mental trauma, or physical trauma in some guys. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, on the brain part of it, yeah, I mean, absolutely, I agree. I mean, and there's so much we do not understand about the brain. I mean, the brain very clearly can compensate for all sorts of trauma, and yes, I mean, things like that do show that the brain neurology is involved with this. I mean, in different ways, in complex ways. I mean, so I mean, and that is consistent with autism affecting the brain in different ways, and that in turn affecting memory and past life memory. Yes.
Yeah, I was just trying to say, we have a normal brain, and that seems to inhibit. But if we have some, a relative or someone with trauma, emotional trauma, it accentuates the likelihood of that. And also if we have physical trauma or physical aberration in case of an absent corpus callosum, that's what I'm exploring, that it brings out the paranormal.
Yeah, well, yeah.
That's kind of related to a question I had around, it seems like people with more extreme telepathy, to the point that they are non-speakers, are more likely to have more powerful telepathic capabilities. So you're expecting to see a similar pattern with past life memories, in that the more neurodivergent they are, the more likely they are to have clearer access to those memories.
Well, I don't know. I don't know that that's the case. In the study that I'm doing, I do know of one nonverbal adult with past life memories, but we have not learned of many nonverbal adults with past life memories the way we have learned of many nonverbal adults and children with telepathy. They're different things. I mean, memory is not psi. Memory is not telepathy and clairvoyance. Those types of psychic function are different from memory.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. Okay, Maureen.
Hi, Jim. It's Maureen and David here.
Hi, Maureen.
David has a number of past lives, as you know, but his memories of each of those deaths, very little of day-to-day life in those memories, but very strong memories of those deaths. Can you speak to that? Do you have any ideas?
Well,
why?
yeah. I mean, well, death is something that I don't know that it's 70% of cases, but I've seen figures like 50 to 60, right? In 50, 60% of cases, the death will be recalled. Now, we don't really know why that is. The guessing is that it's something that is especially traumatic and therefore memorable. So it really does not surprise me that David remembers the deaths particularly well.
Thank you.
Right. Yes, over there, Tara.
I was wondering how referencing autistic people particularly and the fact that they have a different wiring in their brain to access information differently. And I was wondering if maybe they're going to teach us a new way of thinking, and that the way that our brains doesn't have maybe as much strong psychic abilities, maybe. So I don't know how I was going to explain it.
I think what you're trying to say is, could we learn to develop our mental capacities more, including psychic abilities and accessing memories through the neurodivergence of autistic kids? Fair enough. Okay.
What do you?
So is the study of past life memories in autistic people going to be able to give us more insights about the nature of neurodivergence, such that we can actually learn more about how to develop our memory capacity and potentially our psychical abilities as well?
Yeah, no, I don't see how it would help us learn how to access them better. It would learn more. We would learn more about how they surface when they do, but I don't see how it would help us learn how to access them.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
I was just wondering how Jim distinguishes these markings and that on the body as past life, separate to it sort of being like unresolved phenomena in consciousness. Does that make sense? Let's say Charlie, the uncle, committed suicide. If there's some sort of like leftover, unresolved, I don't know, felt consciousness, and then that sort of transfers to the nephew.
The physical body.
Yes, that's what I'm suggesting. Yeah,
Did you hear
that's what
that?
I'm suggesting.
Okay.
That's what I'm suggesting, and this is where, remember, my psychogenic idea. The psychogenic idea being the incoming consciousness influences its new body to produce these things, right? To produce the birthmarks, birth defects, also perhaps lays down in the brain, the new brain, the neurological, the neural pathways needed to support the behaviors, and emotions and other aspects of personality, things that carry over, because all of this are things that that the brain is involved in. So the brain has to be affected, and for them to carry over successfully. And so my idea is that it's the incoming consciousness impresses those things on its new body.
But is that past life or is it some sort of like transference almost, if that makes sense? I'm sort of asking ontologically, is it a past life or is it like the nephew's still a separate part of consciousness, but with
Right. So
aspects of the
in other words, you think it could be the result of some other kind of psi mechanism.
It's still like past, but is it sort of like
Okay, well, here's
or is it sort of simplicity or something? This is just a very out there question.
I think you heard that all right, Jim, did you?
no, I didn't. I heard part of it, but it broke up at the end. Please repeat it.
Shooting past.
Yeah, no.
Russ, if you can repeat it, I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, just trying.
Like in a multi, it's the nephew plus elements of the uncle, rather than just it was the uncle, now it's the nephew.
As in the consciousness transferring from one to the next.
Was the uncle, now it's the nephew, rather than uncle and nephew.
Right. As in term, when you say it, I'm not sure what you mean. Oh yeah,
You mean retrieve? You mean retrieve from some sort of Akashic record? Is that what you're getting at?
Just that it's been posing the potential exploration, I guess.
Okay. So how do we know it's one individual person as an individual soul, so to speak, rather than a collection of different elements from different places?
Okay, because they're very
That's what it is.
specific. Yeah, because it's a network of things that are very specific to one person. So it's the memories plus specific behaviors plus specific personality things plus specific physical traits, all related to one individual. And this is beyond anything that we know that ESP is capable of, first of all. And it's beyond anything that we know that, say, mediumistic possession is capable of. I mean, when you bring in the physical stuff, it's just a network of things, all of which tie back to one specific individual. So it's not like, the things are brought in, put together from several different deceased people. No, it's all related to one specific deceased person. Another suggestion, more generally, that something like what I described is involved is that we have in parapsychology a lot of other kinds of cases, right? We've got apparition cases. We have, dreams where the deceased, are dreamt about. We have mediumistic communications. We have all these other things which seem to suggest a discarnate consciousness communicating with the living. So it does seem like consciousness continues after death until it reincarnates.
Because it's quality when it's sort of like a past life.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, please. Prominent.
I've done about 9 sessions looking at past lives, and
Sessions.
9.
9 sessions.
Actually written a book and done. Everything I saw was just through images, and I've written a book about it. And this is done through deep sort of meditation. But I was on other planets as well as lives on this earth. And I asked to see a life in the future as well, to see. Well, I was expecting to see my husband's baby, but didn't. I went 800 years into the future. So I sort of, for my own self, I feel that there is something there with that memory. It's not, for me, I can't explain it, but for me, what I saw was very true, and it connected in with things that have happened in this life. And there's one, the first one that I did was in 1996, and then 2002, I met a girl And she said, I know you from somewhere. And finally she said to me, I remember we were in this place where there were pyramids and we were all dressed in yellow with flowers in our hair. And I had never met her before. And she was talking about the first journey that I did. So it would be interesting to hear what you think about that.
Okay. So did you hear that, Jim?
Not the first part, not the real question. I heard some of the second, but I couldn't really connect them together, so I'm not sure what the question is. If you would repeat it.
Well, Bronwyn was narrating a lot of her experiences about some past life memories and also some ideas around some future precognition, and wondered what you thought about it. I'm not really sure what you're expecting as an answer to that. Yeah, could we keep to questions about the subject, please, about autism and what Jim's been discussing?
Can you explain why one of my past life journeys that I did, someone came up to me 6 years after I'd been on that journey through meditation, and came up to me and said, I remember being with you, and she described the situation that I was in the past life. Have you ever come across that kind of thing?
I'm not sure I caught all of that. Russ, if you could just briefly tell me again.
So Bronwyn experienced someone coming and saying to her that she has experienced her in a past life, and have you experienced anything like that?
Not personally, but I have heard from other people who feel that they have encountered people that they knew in past lives. It's not an uncommon thing, actually.
Right. At the back, please.
Your model, do you see the past life memories as being downloaded into the brain of the individual? Or do you see that individual as being able to access those memories sort of like in the cloud?
Okay, so this is about where the memories are being accessed from. So is the information downloaded into the brain, or is the individual accessing it from, quote unquote, the cloud or the Akashic records?
Okay, once again, I mean, I think memories are in the subconscious part of the mind. I don't think they're out in the cloud or in the Akashic records. I think they're too, if they were in the Akashic records, we would be able to access, any lives, right? And, it wouldn't be just one, and there'd be no reason for the lives that we remember to coincide with the physical effects that we have. So for me, the memories are inside ourselves, not outside ourselves.
Okay, Susanna?
In that context, so how then does the subconscious mind or memory or whatever, how does that transfer from one person to another?
How does the subconscious? Yeah.
How does the subconscious what?
How does the subconscious transfer from one body to the next?
Because it's part of consciousness. I mean, in consciousness, I'm saying, it survives death, and then it continues to exist in its discarnate state until it becomes affiliated with the new body. Now, how exactly does that process happen? And we don't really know yet. I mean, even those of us who accept this idea that consciousness, and most parapsychologists do, William James is one of the first to suggest this, but parapsychologists generally do accept that consciousness is independent of the brain, and it interfaces with the brain. The two consciousness and the brain interface. But how exactly that is done, we don't know yet. I mean, it's something still to be investigated. But yeah, no, for me, I mean, the memories are in the subconscious part of consciousness. Consciousness is not something that ceases to exist at death and then becomes into an existence at birth, and we have to explain all that. Consciousness, to me, is something that survives death, continues through death, and then affiliates with a new body. And when it affiliates to a new body, all of the memories and things, and not just things we call memories, the autobiographical memories that we think of as memories, but all behavioral memories, emotional memories, personality, and all of that is in our subconscious, and it can influence us from within the subconscious. But sometimes under certain conditions, it can come up into our conscious awareness, and that's when we're aware of it and we think of it as a memory.
All right,
I don't know.
fantastic.
That's sort of how I understand it, how the transfer is made. I don't think it goes from here and suddenly appears there. I think it's a process like this.
Beautiful. All right, Alex.
Just have a question around the laboratory work that you're planning.
Can you just speak really loud so you can hear it?
How do you plan to empirically test some of this in the laboratory?
How do you plan to test in the laboratory?
Okay, when you say you want to test it in the laboratory, what do you mean particularly autism or your past life memory? What in particular are you talking about?
You actually mentioned in your talk about how this is amenable to laboratory testing.
Yes.
So I was wondering the same thing.
Yeah. All right. Well, very good. But I mean, okay, so specifically you're looking at memory or specifically at autism memory, past life memory?
Well, it's whatever you were talking about.
All right. Well, what I was talking about. Okay. So you are planning to do it, or you're thinking you have a laboratory, laboratory that you will do it in?
Well, I think I was curious about your plans for, like, how could this research be progressed? Because one of the hurdles with past life regression is that it's very anecdotal. So how can it actually be tested in the laboratory? Or do you believe that it's not possible to test?
No, I absolutely believe it's possible, but the project that we're embarking on is to get to that point. I remember we're starting with cases. From the cases, we'll develop a questionnaire when we know the questions to ask in the questionnaire. And from the questionnaire, we'll be better able to discern the patterns and know what it is that we want to look for in the lab. I mean, you can go into the lab now and just do exploratory studies. Right? You can just go in and do exploratory studies and learn something from that. Or you can try to do research in a more systematic way, build up to that work. And that's the approach we're taking. So I don't know yet. I can't tell you yet what to study because I don't know. Now you can go in and study in an exploratory way. It's not too early to do that.
Okay, well, wow, so many more questions. Yes, please.
Sorry, just to expand on that. Autism and neurodivergence is still an evolving field.
So autism and neurodivergence is still an evolving field.
I'm sorry, autism and what?
Autism and neurodivergence is a evolving field. And
is that a question? Okay.
Well, I'm just doing it in parts.
Okay, is that a statement or a question?
No, I'm just doing it in parts. She's still talking. I'm just giving you bits as we're going.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay.
Are you planning on using any special equipment to measure autism in the brain?
Yeah, we have.
And how are you planning on making that more rigorous? Okay, that's the end of the question.
Well, when we in the field, I mean, we're limited to portable equipment if we want to try to get at that level. We can use like portable EEG machines. To do more sophisticated research, we're actually going to need to bring either the children or the adults into the laboratory themselves and study it there. But it would be through fMRI or something like that in the lab. Yes, but before we get there, we would study the cases the ways that we normally study them, through interviews, through questionnaires eventually, and so we begin to understand the things that we then need to look at more carefully in the lab.
I'm thinking we might just take another couple of questions and then wrap up. Jim, are you okay with that?
Sure. I mean, it's up to you.
All right. Josh.
So how does neurodivergence affecting past life memory recall? make it trickier for skeptics to argue against?
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's a good one. Okay, so how does the relationship between neurodivergence and past life memories make it trickier for skeptics to argue against?
Yeah, that is a very, very good question. Well, and I closed on that, didn't I? I meant to. I think that if we can find what we're hoping to find, it'll make it very difficult, because the ways that they like to use to explain this away aren't going to work anymore. In other words, we'll be able to show something really hard. We'll be showing a relationship that it's really that it becomes a scientific. One of their complaints is that reincarnation can't be studied scientifically. By that, they mean you can't study in the lab. We're doing it in the lab, takes that away from them. We show relationships. If we're successful with this, we show regular relationships of one sort or another. If this, then that, right? And you know, if we can show that, if we do it with enough people to have this sort of a statistical correlation here, then this becomes something that they can't say, oh, this is just a chance thing.
Yes, at the back there.
Yeah. I have dyslexia, and I know that's a form of neurodivergence. Have you had cases in the past with either children or adults that have had dyslexia that have caused different perspectives, at least, through the autism spectrum?
Did you hear? Oh, so okay. So the gentleman has dyslexia.
Yeah,
and is wondering about studies into dyslexia and the relationship with past life memories.
Yeah, no, I haven't looked at that specifically. I have heard of some people with past life memories saying that they're dyslexic. Now, of course, dyslexia can go with either neurotypicality or, you know, neurodivergence, either one. But I haven't looked specifically at it. I have heard, and there are other things too. I mean, and it could very well be. Now, do you have past life memories? May I ask that?
Do you have past life memories?
Yes, they come up very frequently.
Yes, they come up very frequently.
Okay. Well, then, I would like to. Then I'll pay attention to that. I'll look at that. That could be something. There could be something to it. I would like to, if you could, you and the person who asked about studying this in the lab, if Russ could let me know, your names or put me in touch with you, I would appreciate that.
Okay. All right, let's have a last question. Who's got the most important question to ask? All right, up the back there, go on.
To relive their lives through others, and also to interpret the cases of others being burdened with the past life memories. Would one technique be to simply avoid speaking?
Wait. Let's just have one question at a time, please. So, what was the first one again? Why would somebody want to relive their past life memories? Was that your question?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very good question. And people who have these, I'm sorry?
No, why would they like to have their memories in another life? Oh, okay. So, yeah. So why would anybody want to have these past life memories in their next life?
Well, Nina Graboi did, by the way. I mean, and this may be a factor. Nina Graboi believed in reincarnation. She believed in reincarnation most of her life. And she wanted to have past life memories. In fact, she told some people that she would, if she were able to come back, she would let them know, and she did. Right? Right. And so it could very well be that the desire to have past life memories is one of the things that helps promote them. Now, why would somebody want to have past life memories? It can vary. Some people want to have past life memories and want to remember their present lives and their future lives because they imagine this is somehow going to help them. most people who have these past life memories will tell you they wish they didn't. So I think, yeah, it's a case to be careful what you wish for. It can very easily take over your life, but it can, but is, you know, it can be, you know, so I don't know whether, I don't know whether I've answered that or not satisfactorily.
No, that was really good. Thank you very much, Jim. Thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us here today. And if you're ever in Australia or in Melbourne in particular, then you'd be very much more welcome to come and join us again. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you. I've enjoyed being here.